Happy Wednesday, everybody. Today's episode is a wonderful one, and I want to get straight to it. We have the wonderful, I've already said wonderful once, but obviously she's extra wonderful, Maddie Mae from Adventure Instead. If you're eloping, thinking about eloping, going to elopement, or you want to be an elopement photographer, there's nobody better to learn from than the guys over at Adventure Instead, and they are just so cool. So I wanted to dive into Maddie's story, how she transitioned into a collective after being a brand herself, and just kind of her story and why she does what she does. So without any further ado, here is Maddie Mae of Adventure Instead. Maddie, so I just want to check in. I always like to check in with the guests with a fun starting point just to kind of throw you off. You're bilingual, right?
I do speak Spanish. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not quite as fluent in Spanish as English, but yeah, I do. I learned Spanish kind of throughout school, and I've spent quite a bit of time in Central and South America. So it's come in extremely handy. It's a useful skill to have.
That's super cool. I was just kind of like reading on the site, just catching up on everything. And I was like, oh, like she speaks a different language. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And if it's enough to get around, that's good enough for me. That's really awesome.
Yeah, it's my fluency is kind of funny, actually, with Spanish. It comes and goes depending on how hungry or tired I am or how much alcohol I've had to drink. It's kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, definitely can get into good conversations. If you can argue with someone in Spanish, I feel like that's a good test of fluency. So
wow. Yeah, that is next level. I like barely am, just from trips to Central America. I'm like, puedo tomar una foto. Like, can I take a photo, please? So, like, that's all I got. So anything, if you can argue in Spanish, that's next level for sure.
Yeah, well, it does come in handy occasionally when you need to argue with someone.
That's a whole other story. We'll have to ask sometime. Is like, who are you arguing with in Spanish? But anyway, that's awesome. So one, I want to thank you for coming on. I've followed your work for the past 2 years, and then I realized that one of my buddies and a guy whose workshop I've attended, another podcast guest, Robert Hill, knows you a varying amount, and he said you're also he confirmed your coolness, essentially.
Robert is great. Yeah, him and I have been friends for the past couple of years, and yeah, I totally dig that dude. He's really nice.
So I feel like you do a really good job at just pushing this niche, and I'm sure you've gone through lots of transformations, which I want to get into, but I love just having people on who are just good at what seems like one themed thing. Whereas I feel like a lot of people, including myself, we struggle with the, like Robert Hill was the first person that was like, Adam, you don't have to blog every wedding. I was like, what? That's insane. And it's just, that's two different schools of thought. But you go to Robert's site and you go to your guys' site, and everything is just so consistent in, these just branding points, everything that you guys are following along. And I think you guys do a really good job at that. And one, you're just a badass, obviously. Like, go look at the work, and it's incredible. So tell me about you. Give me the rundown. What would be on the back of your book as far as the bio goes for Maddie Mae and Adventure Instead? And just like, how did you get started in photography, and what kind of transitions have you gone through to get to where you are now?
Sure, absolutely. So I just, as long as I can remember, I've always had a camera in my hand. I started taking photos outside just kind of by myself as kind of like a loner, very introverted child with like not really that into like social things or, like really painfully shy actually. And so most of my time outside was like kind of spent alone, just kind of being in nature and with a camera, like as soon as the digital age happened and my parents like got a digital camera, it just like pretty much was mine. It was just in my hand all the time. So I'm a massive introvert. I grew up here in Colorado, and it was just like a creative tool, like drawing or painting for me. It was just, come home from school, go hang out outside and just take 1,000 pictures of icicles until like I got bored or cold and came back in. And so that's kind of where it started, was just like landscapes and animals and sunsets and rainbows. And like, that was like where I got started. And I actually did not ever think I would take photos of people. I don't know, being a really like pretentious 14-year-old is like, I'm a landscape photographer. Like, portrait photographers are sellouts. I just remember being like 14 and like thinking that. And then I don't know, kind of like a pretty introverted emo teenager, like one of my only friends, her and I were just a little bit kind of dark and moody. And so she was like, let's put on my homecoming dress and like take photos in the forest. I was like, okay, that we can do that. So that was like the very first time I took portraits of anyone. There was this big open space by my house, and we went and we hung out. And I just remember like the additional element of a person into the landscape being like incredibly exciting to me. I remember there being like a light bulb going off in my head. I remember like an exact specific photo. Like, I think it was almost about exactly 10 years ago is when this was. It was like in the spring. And I remember like she was in her dress and like there was like a mountain in the background and she was like twirling it around at sunset. And like now obviously I can tell like why I liked taking that photo, but I remember just like squealing behind my camera and like not even real understanding like why I was so excited. But it was just like something lit up in me when I did that and decided, okay, like I want to take more photos of people, like people with landscapes. That is super fun. And so throughout high school, kind of finishing off my junior and senior year, I was like editor of the yearbook and in a whole bunch of, I'm a super nerd. So I was, president of the Honor Society and doing all these things for like marketing different clubs. And so I took all the photos and was just kind of always documenting things with a camera in my hand, not really in the action of the social events, but that person behind the camera, just taking photos of it all because I'm way more introverted. And so that's kind of, my teachers noticed I was good with photography. I got asked to photograph my high school teacher's daughter's wedding. I did it for free. I was 16, I think, when I shot that. Looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, how did anyone ever let me shoot their wedding when I was 16? But they weren't even going to have a photographer and I did it for free. So I don't feel too bad about it. So I just kind of photographed all my friends' senior portraits as well and just got really into portraiture, decided I was going to start my own business. And so I did. And, but I actually didn't believe that wedding photography was a viable career at all. I thought that was pretty much a pipe dream, like wanting to be a rock star or like in the NBA or something. I was like, no, like that's like super far off. Like that's not practical. My whole family is like engineers and architects and doctors and lawyers. And so because I was really smart, like I graduated valedictorian in my high school, like I said, like introverted nerd, no friends. I got a full academic ride to college and I'd never crossed my mind to do art with that degree. It was like, I studied engineering in college. And I loved it and I was great at it. So I was in college for studying engineering for a few years. And I freaking miss engineering a little bit. Actually, I loved like the nerdiness of it. I loved, kind of being, like 10 to 15%, only 10 to 15% of engineers are women. And I don't know, I kind of liked being the minority and standing out a little bit and being different and showing up all the boys with my knowledge. I thought that was fun. And so but every summer throughout college, I kept running my photography business and I shot more and more weddings. I did 3 one summer and then 5 and then 7 and then like 13 one summer. And then all of a sudden, like I had this like really interesting, like bipolar life where I would like shoot weddings all summer long and, be able to be so creative and, run my business and like nerd out about how to market my business. And then I would be in school and I loved engineering and I was great at it. And it was insane to me to consider switching out of it. But I just realized I didn't want like my day-to-day lifestyle to be an engineer I didn't want the life of what an engineer lives. And I kind of had this thought like this one like winter break right after I'd finished finals of, I'm dying inside creatively. I'm feeling like, I'm being sucked dry by this degree where it just has no room for creativity. Like, I wonder if I put like all of my mental faculties, including all my nerdiness towards my business, like, could I actually make this work? Could I make it actually happen? Like, and I was able to see that more clearly once I was in college, and once, I was, 20 and, shooting 15 elopements in a summer while I was still a full-time student. I thought maybe I could make this work. So I switched over and I did a marketing degree. So I spent a little bit longer in college and finished a marketing degree. And that was honestly one of the best decisions I ever made for my business. So I'm an entirely self-taught photographer. I've never taken a photography class. But learning business in college was like one of the smartest moves I have ever made, because I was able to directly apply everything that I was learning in business directly to, like, how can I apply this to my business? How can I apply this to my industry? How can I apply this to my niche? How can I apply this to my niche? And that's how, and it was around that same time that I ended up getting hired to photograph my very first elopement, and kind of everything just fell into piece. Everything that I was learning in my marketing degree was that, niche is where it's at, like specialize and just like kill it in a certain niche rather than trying to compete with everyone. And I just stumbled on a niche that I just completely fell in love with. When I photographed my first elopement in 2015, I completely fell in love. I had photographed big weddings for, I guess, like 5 years at that point. But the first elopement I photographed was the very first wedding day that I could ever imagine myself having someday. And it just like really rocked me. It was another one of those like key pivot points, like key light bulb moments that I can distinctively remember, like all the things about that day and how I was feeling, and how it just like blew me over with just how incredible it was and how different it was than the big weddings that I was used to photographing. And another part of my story that definitely plays into this is, one of the reasons why that elopements just connect with me so deeply compared to big traditional weddings is like my family story and my family history. And, I'm not close to my family currently at all. I've been pretty detached from them for the past couple of years, as I grew up in a very traumatic environment. And it was not an option for me, let's put it that way, to like have a father-daughter dance, or for, my dad to walk me down the aisle. I grew up in a violent alcoholic home, and I didn't realize until I photographed an elopement that every single time I photographed a big wedding, like it killed me a little bit inside to see those like close family interactions, like, a parent giving a beautiful, like heartfelt toast to their child on their wedding day. And like, family, like big weddings are steeped in family tradition. It's everywhere. You can't get away from it. And I didn't realize that there was such a big disconnect for me until I was in an elopement where that element was removed. And, I was so connected with that couple, and them being able to have a wedding day where they truly felt celebrated. And they also at the same time felt so free and safe to be themselves. They could have the day that really reflected them, and it wasn't about obligation. There was no family drama or stress brought in. I mean, I think a lot of people have, I don't think, like I know a lot of people have complicated families and they don't want to bring that energy into their day. And I think a lot of people are afraid to make that decision to just say, nope, I'm not going to invite trauma and, someone not getting me or seeing me or just being disappointed in me or not approving of who I am on the day that I commit my life to my partner. Like that touches me very, very deeply. And when I discovered elopements, it was a no-brainer in my mind. I just knew like, this is what I'm supposed to do. These are the type of wedding days that I care about. These are the type of couples that I deeply care about, wanting to help them have the best day of their lives when they get married, especially since they don't have 100 other people there cheering them on. Like, I want to be that person that says like, you can get married this way. Like it is going to be beautiful and amazing. And it's not sad and it's not lonely. Like the elopements that I've been a part of have been the most incredible, most unforgettable wedding days that I've ever experienced. And so really I've just kind of gotten on this train of like, more people should elope. And that's what I kind of built my brand around, is that passion for that, because that's tied to a deep personal place in me. And so that was a long answer, but yes, that's basically how I got started with all this.
No, I love it. I mean, I appreciate you sharing honestly and openly. And no, I mean, it makes sense. Like elopements, I think, are like the ultimate way that a couple can, say, hey, this day is for us. And, you know, it's, one would say, some people might be like, oh, that's selfish, but also at the same time, like, no, it's just about them. Like, they decided not to, you know, spend the money on other things, and it's just for them in this moment and this experience and this like chapter. And yeah, like you said, it's, you know, I always ask all my couples, you know, even for more traditional weddings, is like, hey, are there any sensitivities I should know about? And sometimes you're lucky and they'll give you a few, but you know, that's not all of them.
Yeah.
And that's like the bad side of the big weddings. And, you know, I feel like what I've seen through a lot of weddings are those interactions with parents that even have like a moderately quote unquote okay relationship. And, you know, the biggest thing I try to do, and it's one of our company values, is actually to try and eliminate fear on wedding day. Yeah. And we're big on that. And it's such a day where you don't want that. Like, you know, I think it's like bullshit. You don't want that to happen. You don't want anybody to have to experience that. And so I love that you've just pushed that in business wise. And obviously now it's like you have a personal attachment to that too, which is really, really cool. You have not eloped yet, right? You're engaged?
I actually eloped January 1st.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. Sorry, you got to update your site. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. I love you so much. That's cool.
Oh,
that's awesome.
You know, it's possible. It's been a busy couple of months that I haven't actually
updated. You're killing it.
Yet.
I mean, now it makes sense. We're like, oh, she's been busy. She just got married. So that's cool.
Yeah, we eloped January 1st, and it was magical. It was everything that I ever wanted it to be. And I didn't think it was I didn't think it was possible to be more passionate about elopements, but eloping myself definitely did it. Honestly, like, I've heard so many couples who I photographed say, like, we wish we could live that day over and over again. And I didn't really understand what that meant until I eloped and did. And we had a day that was truly completely perfect for us. And I will never forget that experience. We went to Peru, which was a country I hadn't been to before we eloped. I'd been in plenty of other places in Central and South America, but Peru is like kind of always drew me, of just like the energy of that place. You know, just incredible history and culture and spiritualism, and just like a really amazing place that I've always been really drawn to. And so we found this hike that was really off the beaten path, i.e. there was like literally no place that tourists can even stay within like 4 hours of this hike. So we ended up doing this hike over 2 days, and it was 10 miles. It was all above 13,500 feet. And it was to this like old Incan ruins that most of the Incan ruins that you see in Peru are very crowded with tourists, but we ended up getting this place all to ourselves. And so we hiked up, we camped the night before, and I got up at 3 a.m. to finish my hair and makeup in a tent. And Amber, my other photographer who works with me for Adventure Instead, her and her husband came with us to Peru, and they hiked up with us. And so she was helping me do my hair and makeup by like headlamp in a tent at 3 a.m. And it was raining on the tent. I was like, oh gosh, of course it would rain, because we went to Peru in the middle of rainy season. It was kind of risky. And then we were just like, okay, well, let's just finish my hair and makeup. So we did. And then we wanted to do a first look. My partner is Scottish, and so he was wearing a kilt. And so I hadn't actually seen really his whole getup, and he hadn't seen mine. And so we set up a first look, and I opened the tent and I look out, and we were basically on the edge of this huge canyon. So we're up at 13,000 feet, but we're on the edge of this canyon, and the whole bottom of the canyon is filled with a cloud. Like, it's a cloud inversion when I walk out of the tent, which was so meaningful to me, is that's honestly my favorite weather on the planet is cloud inversions. I can specifically remember like the handful of times I've seen amazing cloud inversions, which essentially means you're above the clouds, which is this unreal feeling. And so there was a cloud inversion for like our first look on our wedding day. And we we're just like swirling, like clouds were swirling around us as like I walked up to him for our first look, and then we said our vows, and I just sobbed my eyes out, and there was nobody there. And like the energy of this place was just so magical. And it was so incredible for it to just be me and him, and to not have to worry about the audience of anyone else listening to my vows. It was literally what I truly wanted to say to him and how I wanted to promise my life to him. And I think that that's something that that I honestly wish more couples would really think through is, when you're inviting people to your wedding, is that guest list, when you write your vows, are you going to be thinking about that audience, or are you going to be thinking about, what you actually want to say to your partner? Like, would you write your vows differently if certain people who you've invited to your wedding weren't there? And if the answer is yes, like, maybe really consider not inviting them, because I really think that moment that you commit your life to your partner matters. And it's incredibly, I don't understand how it could matter more. It is you are standing there and you're saying, like, I'm promised my life to you, and this is what I want to say, and this is what I mean. And kind of tempering that or watering it down or changing what you're saying because of who might be listening. Like, that's tragic in my mind. Like, that is a tragedy of having a big wedding and feeling obligated to invite certain people to your day. That I am so impressed and so inspired by couples who elope, who put the importance of what they say in their vows and what that moment looks like over pressures and over obligations and over society traditions and social norms. Like, that is what inspires me about couples who elope. And like, that's, the burning passion that I have in this industry, is to tell more couples, like, this is an option for you. Like, think this through. Like, there is nothing sadder than hearing a couple, and I heard this when I photographed big weddings, hearing couples say throughout the planning process, like, oh, I just can't wait for it to be over. Or, how many couples say, like, I wish I would have eloped. Like, it was not what we imagined it would be. It snowballed out of our control. Like, we didn't enjoy our day. It flew by. Like, we don't even hardly remember it. I didn't really get to see anyone who I really cared about. And I think that big weddings, I'm not anti-big wedding at all. What I'm anti is couples feeling forced to do things on the day that they get married that they don't want to do. I think every couple deserves to have a wedding day that they want, like, actually them. And it's funny to me that the idea of having a wedding day that's truly about the couple who's getting married is so non-traditional. Like, that's the whole point. And I think that, the wedding industry is a $70 billion industry in the US. It's this machine that's like designed to snowball out of your control so that you spend more money on your day. And like, couples who elope it's not that they're not willing to invest in an amazing experience. They certainly are. It's not about the dollar amount. It's about investing on things that they care about, that matter, that are relevant to them, not just for the sake of doing it. And so I think that matters a whole lot in the industry. And yeah.
No, I love it. I told you before we started recording that you could rant and just, speak your mind and go for it. So I appreciate just taking your time. Appreciate that. Yeah, no, it makes sense. I feel like it's, a lot of couples talk about how the wedding day, just by the time you get to wedding day, it doesn't feel like them anymore.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like what they had envisioned. And yeah, I think that's where, like, if a person actually wants a big wedding and they want to make it happen, like, I watched one of the planners that I follow, and they had musicians on, like, in the middle of the pool on these stations that they had to, like, use a bridge to get the musicians there, and then they hid the bridge so it looks like magically the musicians showed up. And I was like, this looks really cool. I was like, this is amazing. But I was like, that person had to have wanted that kind of wedding or something like that. And I think, yeah, you're dead on with, like, couples who say those things after the wedding, and it becomes this, like, giant group project, and you thought it was just you and your partner, and now it's like, oh no, you have other partners in this group project, and that's not awesome.
Yeah, it can just, I think the main difference between an elopement and a big wedding, and I've wrestled with this for a while, having photographed both and photographed a lot that were kind of in the middle, and where I've decided, for me personally, I believe the line is between an elopement and a big wedding is the focus of an elopement day. At the end of the day, it is about the couple, and whether there's guests there or not, whether there's a handful of people, whether there's 5, 10, 15, or I've even been in an elopement with up to about 25 people where the focus of the day still remained entirely about the couple, where every single person who was there had that focus and were there to support and celebrate with, did not make the day or draw focus or draw attention to themselves, didn't interject their own expectations and opinions and and obligations onto the couple. It was, we're here to, be a part of the day that you've designed, that you want, and we're here to support you and love you and celebrate with you. And, the couple had a whole bunch of that day that was just the two of them as well. So elopements can definitely have guests at them. I think where the line is, I've been at even like a 10 or 12 person event that was titled an elopement that certainly felt more like a big wedding because of the energy of it, and the focus of it was lost. It was not about the couple anymore. It had become about all the other things like the show, the big production, the timeline, the planner stressing everybody out, or whatever it ended up being. It was not about the couple anymore. Like I think the guests have the guests and how they show up and with what intention they show up definitely affects the vibe of the day. And so really it is true, the more people you invite, the more variables that you are dealing with, and the more chances there are that the focus is going to shift from really being on you two and your commitment to something else. But there's no line of like, this number of people equals wedding and this number of people equals elopement. I think it's really the focus and the intention of the day is where the line is. Is it about you, or is it about something else, or your guests, or traditions or obligations, or is it about it being a big show for somebody else?
Right. No, that makes sense. Now, when was the last, we'll call it like traditional wedding, when was the last one you've done? Or do you still do those and they just don't make it out publicly? Or how does that work when a couple emails you and they're like, hey, will you photograph our 100-person wedding, and we know it's not what you normally do? Or do you just say no? What's that process look like for you? And if not, like, what was the last one you did? And yeah. Sorry, that's kind of loaded.
Sure, yeah. So 2017 was the last time I photographed a big traditional wedding of any sort, and that wedding was booked probably a year and a half prior to that. So I had about, depending on how you define it, probably a 12 to 18 month transition from being completely 100% big traditional weddings to completely 100% intimate weddings and elopements. So less than 20 to 25 people in attendance, which is where like we kind of publicly draw the line-ish on our site, just because that's in my experience where the line sort of ends up being, although it is not a guarantee that just because you only have 20 people at your day that it will feel like an elopement, as I've mentioned before. But so when I got an inquiry, I think in the last day or two actually, for a big traditional wedding, which doesn't actually happen that often anymore because it has such a specialized brand for a few years now, and you can't scroll through any page on my site without realizing that I only do elopements, and that's very much on purpose. And
right.
And so us being like so narrowly focused and so poignantly positioned and branded helps a ton. But it does occasionally happen. I mean, maybe 5 or 6 times a year, like once every 2 months, we will get an inquiry for a wedding day that is bigger than the size that we offer service for. And yeah, so at this point, I do turn those down. And because we have the demand from elopements only and have done for a couple of years to support turning that business down. So my transition year, the very first year, after I had rebranded to be fully elopement focused, I was still getting big wedding inquiries from referrals and venues I had connections with in the big wedding industry. And until I had the demand to truly support turning that work down, I did not turn it down. But I did not, I was still very careful about curation, what I was posting, what I was blogging, what I was putting on Instagram. From the rest of the world's perspective, I switched and only did elopements immediately. It happened in 1 month flat, really, from an outside perspective, even though I was really shooting about half and half for about 12 to 18 months until I had the demand fully just from the elopement side that I was able to support myself full time, only photographing elopements. So my transition year was kind of around 2016. That was like the half and half year. And then by 2017, I was completely all elopements. I think I had one like straggler that I shot in 2017. Otherwise, I photographed 55 elopements that year. So
Wow. Now, do you still do 55 yourself, or now that you have a team, do you guys kind of spread that out, or does it look like 100 elopements? What's that look like for you guys?
Yeah. So really that year of shooting 55 elopements on my own was a big part of the reason why I scaled and why I turned Maddie Mae photography to adventure instead. And it really just all came back to my why, like my purpose and my reason for doing all of this, which is the fact that I want more couples to have the freedom and to be really encouraged to make the brave choice to have a wedding day that truly reflects them and to have an adventurous elopement. And, I was just getting, an inquiry every day, like 30 inquiries a month. I just shot 55 that year. And by that fall, it was really clear to me I had two choices. I could either double or triple my prices. I had to cut my volume way back. It was not a sustainable amount of elopements to be shooting per year. And so I had two choices. I could serve less people for, more money, or I could bring someone else who had the same passion and talent for photographing elopements and have them partner along with me so that together we could serve more couples. So that's when I hired Amber, and she's another phenomenal photographer, extremely talented, absolutely, loves being outdoors. She's a professional skydiver, actually. She's a licensed skydiver, and she's super badass and adventurous. She lives in Estes Park, Colorado, is, hiking with her two adorable dogs all the time. We were kind of kindred spirits in the industry, and she had moved out here from Pennsylvania and, hadn't quite taken a hold of that exact market yet, but it was hands down her dream, and her passion completely aligned with being someone to help couples have amazing elopement days. And so it was one of the best decisions I've made recently to bring her on, and she has been absolutely incredible. And it's been so fun creating a team that's all around the same purpose and the same mission to enable couples to have the most incredible elopement day. And, one of the main reasons I chose Amber, in addition to her being a talented photographer, was that she had that same heart for elopements and that same heart of like service, and just like the focus of the whole day is always about the couple and always about helping them have the most amazing experience, versus like, it's not about us getting amazing photos. It's not about us getting that banger for our Instagram feed. That is not the point of elopements at all. And it is, the point of the day is that the couple like never forgets that experience, and that it's everything that they want. And Amber has been unbelievable at making that happen for couples just as much as I do. And it's one of the things I appreciate about her the most. And so I scaled and I created Adventure Instead in a really different way than I've seen other photographers create, in a different way that I've seen other photographers scale their businesses. I know a lot of people do associate programs. So like I see photographers when they get to a level where they have more demand and more business than they can take on, they will create kind of a hierarchical structure where, they're the name, and then they have like these collective of underlings who are, doing the same thing, but not quite to the same level, and they cost less money. And I didn't like that approach for several reasons. One, I didn't want anyone to feel like they were getting a second best experience for their elopement day, that they were getting second best anything for their elopement day. I also, I also know that what couples are looking for, even more than images, is an incredible experience. We're experience creators, not just photographers. I think my work is fine and good, but I don't think that it alone is what makes me stand out. And it alone is not what has brought me to these levels of success. It is like the reason and the mission and the purpose behind all of it. It is the passion for elopements. It is the focus on service and creating incredible experiences that has gotten me, and then now gotten us as a team to where we're at. And so basically the way that Adventure Instead is structured is we all do the same service for all of our couples. Like we have all of the same gear. We have walked through every single part of an elopement day. Every single part of our workflow is like locked down, and we all have a very homogenized service. We really do the same thing. We all care equally about elopements and our couples, and our prices are the same between each of us. It's not hierarchical structure. And I have, this is how a lot of other industries create this kind of more agency style collectives, and they make so much sense, but photographers just don't seem to be scaling in this way. And I think, I don't know, maybe some of it has to do with artistic ego or just the perception that it's something really unique in one photographer's photos that makes their brand, when I think that it's so much more than that.
That's so fascinating, because I feel like I've talked to a few photographers on here and explored the associate side of things, and you're totally right? Like the new best thing you can do for associates, if you're even doing it the old-fashioned way, is to like not make it feel like they're getting the B team, hopefully, because that doesn't make sense for like a luxury brand. Like, like in what we, as you just said, a $70 billion business, like we're a luxury industry, and it's, but I think from the owner's perspective, I know for me, I've kind of like joked and explored and looked at that option. And one, for me, it's mostly from the business side, like, oh, well, we could generate more income, like we could generate more profit, and grow sales and all that stuff. But I'm curious from the agency perspective, how does that work, if you don't mind, like just the ownership then? Because I think it's a really cool idea. I think it's awesome. And maybe you're just like so altruistic and amazing that like the business person is just like, no, like we split it, we do it the same or whatever. Like, how does that work? And then are you part owner? Are you guys partners? How does that work?
Yeah. So, from the brand perspective and from, as far as it's concerned for any client, Amber and me and now Tori, all three of us, provide the same service. We're the same price, and they get the same experience and the same level of quality of images. And if that weren't true, I wouldn't market it that way, but it is true. And from the back end and the way the ownership and the finances work is definitely different. Me being the owner of the business, also the marketer of the business, like all of the strategy and all of like our strategy on all of our marketing channels and our brand awareness and everything that's kind of, goes into the back end of making a brand is all on me as the owner. Yeah. And really, I guess you could call it CEO. So,
that's what I was going to say. I was like, you're running the show.
Right. So I am definitely the one running the show at the end of the day, as far as how the business functions. So you asked me earlier, kind of numbers wise, to kind of put this in perspective. So last year, Amber and I combined did 90 elopements. Instead of doing 55, I did 45. Amber did about 45. So we were at about 90 together last year. This year, I'm scaling back even more. I'm only doing 25, and Amber and Tori will do, 30, 40, 30 to 45, 50 each. So we'll be probably around 100, probably more, elopements between the three of us. So the reason the other side of setting up a program like this is that it's a way better deal for Amber and Tori, and they were able to really live their dreams out as photographers, because I think the normal way associate programs are structured are a really bad deal for photographers. And I know photographers who have run them complain all the time about, retention rates and their associates flaking out on them. And I've always thought, well, of course they're flaking out on you, because it is this short-term transactional contractual relationship, i.e. like, I will pay you $100 an hour to shoot this wedding. That's how a lot of them are set up. It is like a pay per wedding contracted out basis. A lot of times that photographer is still trying to make their own business thrive and function. And once they get to a point where they can, like, they're going to stop associate shooting for whoever they're associate shooting for. It doesn't make sense. They're not invested in the business. They don't care about it succeeding. It doesn't affect them long term. They have no skin in the game. And so when I was setting this up, it was first with Amber, I was looking for someone who was ready to really go all in with me, who was ready to sign a non-compete and say like, yeah, like I'm all in, like I want to work with you in this business. And in exchange, I went all in and took a chance on her. So Amber and Tori are salaried employees. So, more than half of what they get paid has nothing to do with how many weddings they book or don't book. They have a set minimum monthly salary no matter what. And the rest of their salary is bonus based on what they're booking and what they're shooting. So they have the chance to more than double their income every month, depending on, depending on how many bookings they're getting and how much they're willing to fill their calendar with, being sustainable with how much they are photographing. So they, in exchange, they get a fairly stable, it varies a little bit month to month, but the way that the bonuses are structured out is that it's a stable pay that's pretty predictable month to month, which, how many associate photographers can say that they get like stable, reliable pay? They don't know like what they're going to get hired for. They have that crazy seasonal income issue, just like they do being self-employed. Like there's no benefit of associating over working for yourself. There's only downsides. Whereas I wanted to offer Amber and Tori something better than that they wouldn't be able to have working for themselves or in a traditional associate program. Both of them it's their dream to photograph elopements full time. It completely aligns with like their why. And so I'm basically, coming with the offer saying, hey, I get 60 elopement inquiries a month consistently into my business right now based on how I've marketed my business. And, let's make this something that all three of us do together. And, you don't have to worry about where the inquiries are coming in. You don't have to worry about how the inquiries are getting there. You get to work directly hand in hand with each of our couples. Like they're not just showing up and shooting. They are getting on the phone call with couples as soon as they inquire. They are walking them through every step of the workflow, helping them with, finding those epic locations. They're all both of them are extremely talented, at finding amazing off the beaten path spots through location scouting, was, in the same way that I am, and creating amazing timelines for them. And, they're best friends with their couples by the time they show up on their day, the same as I am. So I didn't like the transactional, short-term, not relationship oriented, not sustainable structure that I had seen with associate programs. So, what Amber and Tori get out of the deal is a stable income, working with their dream couples and traveling around the world. The second elopement that Tori booked was a 2-day, $14,000 destination elopement in New Zealand. The second elopement, after joining with us. So they're on cloud nine, they're living their best lives. And that's why this is something, I'm building something that is sustainable. I want them to feel so good about the fact that they gave up their individual businesses and they're getting a really great end of the deal here. And yes, I'm getting a good end of the deal here as well. I'm able to scale my business, and as the owner, definitely reap some of the revenues, even though they're being paid more than a lot of photographers make on their own running their own businesses. So
that's awesome. I love that. Thanks for sharing. I love kind of diving into the nitty gritty. So that's so fascinating. And now I'm screw associating. Let's just build an empire. No, I love that. That's super cool. What was, I'm trying not this. We had no intentions of talking about associating or talking about teams at all today, but Maddie got me. So one quick thing I want to ask, what was that first conversation with Amber like? Just, did you already know her, even just for fun? Let's explore that process. Did you already know her as a person or as a photographer? Did you put a call out on social or in your Facebook group? What was that process? What were some of the fears that you had or she had that you eliminated? And then what are some tweaks that you've learned along the way to kind of help it make it awesome?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I definitely knew Amber before I hired her on. It was something that, when I had this idea that fall, it was, I was thinking around who would be interested in this? And it's a particular type of person that would be interested in a role like this. One, it has to be someone who isn't so far invested in them, in their name and their own artistic ego, to be willing to work alongside someone else, under a brand that they didn't start. That's a certain type of personality trait, which not all photographers have. A lot of photographers, part of the fun of running your own business is it's your name and it's your brand. And so part of that conversation with Amber was, hey, this business is not going to be named Maddie Mae Photography. We're going to rename it together, and it's going to be something we create together. It's going to be ours, not me. You're not working for me. You're working alongside me. We're creating this brand and making it better than it even is right now. And fears wise, I think there's fears on both sides. I mean, from Amber, she was taking a risk, trusting someone, trusting that I'm going to keep getting the inquiries coming in the door and be able to follow through with, with my promises of being able to, hand her those couples that she can book and be able to photograph their amazing elopement days, and that she's going to like enjoy that experience. And from my side, it's a huge risk, when you're changing a business from being something that you are completely in control over to trusting another human being with that, that has flaws and that is valuable, just like I am, to take just as good care of your couples as I do. And so that was a fear of mine for sure. Another fear that I had was, and I think this was just because the handful of photographers that I had thrown this idea by said I was nuts. They said, like, why in the world would you get rid of your brand name? Like, what, people know who Maddie Mae is, couples aren't, going to reach out to you and be just as happy to have Amber and pay the same prices for Amber. And that is a huge myth that so many photographers buy into, that I think is a massive mistake, because, and I am so proud to say this, like in the last more than 2 years now that it's not just been me in this business, I've had, I think, only one inquiry ever out of hundreds of inquiries that when Amber reached out to them and said, hey, like, I'm ready to jump on the phone with you, I'd love to help you figure out how to create your own dream elopement. Only one inquiry in a couple hundred inquiries has ever said, like, wait, where's Maddie Mae? Like, nobody. Even when the business was branded under my own name, which it was still Maddie Mae Photography until last November. So even like the first 9 months of this, like, Maddie Mae Photography, Amber answers your inquiry, like the way that we branded it and set it up, because this is the truth. Like, no one has wondered where Maddie Mae is. And like that fear was like completely based in, latent artistic ego. And actually it makes me so happy and so proud to know that that's the truth, because it confirms for me that only photographers think that it is like tiny little minute differences in our work that makes us stand out. And that, they forget that our couples are not photographers. They're not professional photographers who stare at, thousands of wedding photos per day. They can't tell the difference in minute differences between this warm preset and that warm preset, and like this person's style of natural candid posing and that person's style of natural candid posing. Like, wedding photography looks more and more the same now than it ever has. And, of course, like there's a minimum level of photographic competency that you need to achieve. Of course, like, the average couple can tell the difference between a bad photo and a great photo, but can they tell the difference between a great photo and a photo that would win a photography contest? Like, they're not photography judges. And also, it's not just images that they're evaluating when they're deciding who to hire. It is an emotional decision based in so much more than just what someone's photos look like. Like, this day and age, more than ever, they could be looking at 10 photographers that, from their opinion, like pretty much have the same work, like have the same quality and level of work. So what else is there to make you stand out if it's not your photos? And I think photographers put way too much emphasis on obsessing about minute tweaks to their style and their editing, and a new lens choice is what's going to, make or break their success. And it's just simply not true. And I think scaling in the way that I have, even though it really kind of mind boggled a few people who I had told this idea, who understood the industry, were like, photographers don't do this. Like, photographers who get good and get big names and get, to a point where they have more demand that they can handle, like, they don't share that and then rebrand and make a collective. That's not what happens, even though so many other industries do that. So, and I think it was really just getting them out of my own way and realizing that what my brand was about was so much more than just images, and like my particular, minute little differences on the way that I do images versus Amber does, and versus how Amber does her images, which are also incredibly phenomenally good. And we shoot on the same gear and edit with the exact same presets. And, to the average human being, like, there's no difference in our work. Only a photographer could maybe tell the minor differences between what we're providing.
Totally. No, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. One last thing, because I want to let you go, because I know you are crazy packing for the Faroe Islands, and I'm sad. I was supposed to go, and I was supposed to go this year. We had tickets booked and everything for October, and then a very amazing opportunity came through, and so I'm not able to go at that time. So I'm jealous, as usual. But so I want to know, the last thing I want to ask you is just how do you go about, and you can even give a practical tip of like, even photos that you do take for your couples that you might not post. You might say, hey, I never post photos of moms, right? Or something like that. How do you curate, and what have you kind of learned, and maybe what do you see other photographers not doing that great at when it comes to curation?
I think that curation is really difficult. Honestly, it is. It is really hard. And I think it's hard because as the person who takes the image, we become emotionally attached to the images that we take. Like we remember what that moment was, and we look at it with a context and a story behind it that someone viewing it for the first time may not see or understand or realize. So I have oftentimes, to be honest, been surprised at, let's say, for example, like what does well on my Instagram account. One of the images that I'll just keep remembering as an image I almost didn't post because I thought it was kind of weird and quirky and offbeat and like was just really wouldn't perform very well, was like the first image I posted of a bride hiking in her wedding dress with a backpack on. And her eye was like kind of half closed. Like I remember that moment. It was like the very end of an extremely long, exhausting hiking elopement. We were all deliriously tired. We had hit the trailhead at like 1 a.m. And it was just like one of the last like funny photos I took of them. It was kind of like a quirky behind the scenes image in my mind. And I posted it and it went viral all over Instagram. And I almost didn't post that image. And like from a curation standpoint, I didn't think that it would do very, very well, that is just an example of it's, whereas from an outside perspective, it stood out and it went viral because it was so offbeat and different. And at that time, when I first posted that image, you really weren't seeing that anywhere on Instagram. And that was a few years ago. And so I think a big tip is, stepping outside of like your memory of that moment and your emotional connection to that couple, and like how much you liked working with them. Like whoever's looking at that image can't tell those things. They don't know what that moment was like. And it's hard to look at your own work with an objective set of eyes. So I have found really great help, like going over my portfolio with other photographers and, just having someone who can sit down and honestly say like, this image really isn't strong. You should really take it out of your portfolio. And then where I was like, wait, no, like I loved that couple. Like, well, it's not as strong as your other images. Sorry. So curating is really, it is an emotional process that shouldn't be emotional. So like taking emotions out of it is a huge one for sure. I think that's probably the biggest thing. And the second one is I don't think most photographers curate enough. So for example, as I've been doing this longer and longer, I have ended up delivering less and less images in couples galleries, and to a point where like we're more around like 350, 400 images from an 8-hour elopement, which is, on the lower side compared to, bigger traditional wedding photographers, maybe like 600, 700, 800 is more average from what I've seen, at least been 500. And at first I was like, ooh, am I not delivering enough? But I really think from a client's perspective, quality over quantity makes a massive difference. Like if you have a gallery full of 700 images, and let's say like 350 of them, like half of them are really unbelievable, are phenomenal. You've then like diluted those 350 phenomenal images among 350 others like that are good, but not quite as good as those other 350. You have like, on average, you have really massively lowered the quality of the whole gallery, and you've lowered like the perception of like when a client opens that gallery, instead of seeing every single image they look phenomenal in and their partner looks phenomenal and everything is right, half of the images that they're looking at are not as good, and it affects their perception of themselves and how they look in photos and how good they are at taking photos and being photographed. and how good you are as a photographer. It is affected dramatically by that perception. And so really like being ruthless with curating and only really delivering the very best stuff, I think, is the way to go.
I love it. Maddie, thank you so much for coming on. I won't take up any more of your time, but where can people go to find out more about you, and what do you have coming up that people should be excited about?
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely follow us on Instagram. Adventure Instead is our Instagram name, which is awesome. And on our blog on at adventureinstead.com, we're putting out so many really cool resources for eloping couples to help them plan their day on a whole bunch of topics. So really each of them is just kind of like a mini, very helpful rant about something related to elopements to help couples have a resource, because there just isn't as many resources for couples who are eloping as couples who have big weddings. And I'm really, really excited about that.
I love it. You sound really excited, which makes me excited. So that's really cool. That's awesome. Yeah, we need more resources on all of that. And that's so cool. I'm glad you're doing that. Maddie, thanks so much for being on. I wish you all the best. And thanks again so much.
Sure. Thanks, Adam. It's great to talk to you.
Oh, man, what an incredible episode. I know it sounds so cheesy. There are certain times and certain episodes that just make you feel awesome after listening to them. And Maddie is one of those people who obviously has a lot of depth to just what she does and how she cares about people and what matters. So absolutely love her. And I just realized that she, based on her work, I'm like, that homie's she's not whipping out a flash ever. Like, she's just rolling with the punches, and that's part of the adventure. And I'm just like, what would it be like to carry less gear? So that's just really cool. Go just say hi to Maddie and all the crew over at Adventure Instead. Love that strategy. One, I just want to mention to you guys, check out the Patreon. We're killing lots of stuff over there. So we've got tips for culling and workflow and SEO and strategy that are just going to make it a little bit easier and kind of demystify all the aspects of running a successful photography business when you're starting out. So I'd love for you to go say hi over there. Link is in the show notes. And thank you guys for listening. Have a wonderful day. Keep being awesome.